The story began on May 8, 2018, in Westfield, Massachusetts, when police received a call from Detective Brian Fanion around 1:00 p.m. He reported that his wife had shot herself and ended her life, stating he couldn't stop her and was in a state of severe collapse. Police arrived at the detective's home minutes after the report, finding his wife, Amy Fanion, on the dining room floor surrounded by a pool of blood. There was blood spatter on a nearby window and on glasses lying on the floor. The actual bullet, however, was found on the balcony, while its casing remained in the dining room, an unusual detail for suicide cases. This immediately raised investigators' suspicions. Could this be a murder? What truly happened that day? Did Amy Fanion take her own life? Or was she murdered? We'll uncover these answers through the investigation. Let's begin. Amy Fanion came from a relatively large family. She and her sisters were always known as some of the most beautiful girls in school. In 1983, 16-year-old Amy met 19-year-old Brian, and they married in 1985. They had 2 children, Travis and Victoria. The Fanion family was very religious. Brian worked as a deacon at their church and as a missionary building wells in Mexico. Returning to May 8, 2018, a report reached the police from Detective Brian Fanion, informing them that his wife had shot herself. Upon the officers' arrival at Brian and Amy's home, they found Amy lying on her back on the dining room floor, surrounded by a pool of blood, with a gunshot wound to the right side of her head. Brian was seated in a chair, visibly in shock. Amy's brother, Eric Hansen, was also present. He informed the police that after finishing a round of golf behind the house, he heard Brian screaming for help. Upon entering the home, he discovered his sister Amy on the floor with a gun beside her, and Brian holding her hand. Eric quickly moved the gun away, fearing Brian might harm himself given his distraught state. When asked about the weapon, Eric confirmed it was Brian's service weapon. On Tuesday, May 8, 2018, at 2:41 p.m., the official investigation into Brian began. Brian told investigators he left his office at the police department around 11:45 a.m. and headed home. Upon his arrival, he and his wife continued an argument they had started the previous night. When questioned about the reason for the argument, he stated they were discussing what each of them would do upon his upcoming retirement. Brian informed his wife that he didn't want to spend the rest of his life maintaining a 200-year-old house. According to Brian, that afternoon during lunch, Amy told him she had scheduled them to attend a family member's play on the same day. Brian wanted to attend a golf tournament. Brian stated that the discussion then escalated. He took his service pistol from its holster and placed it on the dining room table before going to the bathroom. When he returned, he found his wife holding his pistol, pointing it at the right side of her head, and she said, "You don't want me around." According to Brian, he was about 4 or 5 feet away from her when he tried to stop her from pulling the trigger. However, without any hesitation, Amy pulled the trigger and immediately collapsed. Afterward, Brian called the police and summoned his wife's brother, who informed investigators that the couple had been engaged in sharp and tense discussions. Investigators stated that Brian told them during the interrogation that Amy had suffered from psychological problems several years prior and had been taking medication for some time. Investigators then asked Brian if he had any female friends. He disclosed that he had a friend living in Pittsfield whom he had recently met. He explained that he met her during a trip to Mexico and they became friends. He identified her as Corrine Knowles. Brian and Corrine had met in November 2017 in Mexico, where a friendship developed between them. After concluding their interview with Brian, the police called in Amy's close friend, Terry Licciardi. She informed investigators that Amy loved being a mother and a homemaker, adding that Amy's entire focus was on raising her children. The police then launched an extensive investigation into Corrine and her relationship with Brian. Investigators managed to uncover a hidden treasure, deleted text messages recovered from Brian's phone. There were hundreds of messages indicating that their relationship had progressed beyond mere friendship. On May 7, just one day before Amy's death, Brian and Corinne exchanged 72 text messages, continuing until 9:47 p.m. that evening. One of the messages Brian sent to Corinne read, "Good night, my love. I hope you have wonderful sweet dreams of amazing days and nights ahead." This text was sent at 9:23 p.m. Corinne replied at 10:33 p.m., saying, "Good night, my love. I'll dream of you, and all that the future holds for us." On the morning of May 8, the day the crime occurred, at 12:47 p.m., Brian sent Corinne a text message stating, "Please don't call or text for a while. I'll call when I can. Pray for my family, please." This message was sufficient reason for investigators to reopen the investigation with Brian. Simultaneously, Corinne was being interrogated in an adjacent room to learn more about her relationship with Brian. Corinne informed investigators that she was a wife and grandmother, and her relationship with Brian began when she was experiencing issues in her second marriage. At that time, their connection hadn't gone beyond friendship. But over time, it developed into admiration. On April 16, 2018, 5 months into Brian and Corinne's relationship, text messages between them clearly showed its progression, particularly when Corinne visited Brian's home before they both left for volunteer work. Corinne told investigators that she and Brian would meet in her car. Returning to Brian in the interrogation room, detectives tried to elicit new confessions, but he persisted in recounting the same story he'd previously told. However, the case's trajectory soon shifted entirely. A forensic lab report arrived, stating that the entry wound from the gunshot was inconsistent with the suicide. Detectives confronted Brian with the report's findings, but he continued to deny them, insisting that Amy herself had pointed the gun at her head and taken her own life. The medical examiner who examined Amy's body stated that the manner of death was undetermined, but there was no doubt she had been shot. The crucial question was, from what distance? In Amy's case, distance was vital because with gunshot wounds, debris known as gunshot residue is expelled from the firearm, leaving a distinct pattern on and around the wound, known as stippling. On May 24, 2018, investigators obtained a search warrant for Brian's home. They took additional measurements to analyze the bullet's trajectory and confiscated electronic devices from his home and his office at the police station, including his laptop, for data extraction. On November 6, 2019, 17 months after Amy's death, detectives arrived at Brian's door to arrest him, initiating his trial. During the proceedings, Brian pleaded not guilty to the charge of first-degree murder of his wife. Brian's defense team attempted to focus on Amy's alleged anger issues, claiming she suffered from anxiety. Amy's family, however, expressed their full support for Brian, stating, "We are certain Amy committed suicide." The letter of support was signed by all of Amy's siblings, including her mother. During the trial, Amy's youngest sister, Anna Hansen, was the prosecution's first witness and the only family member to testify against Brian. Anna stated that her brother-in-law, Brian, had told her he was concerned about searches he had conducted on his computer regarding how to make a murder look like suicide. When she asked him why, he claimed Amy had asked him to do it. Next, Corinne testified in court, stating that Brian was concerned about ending his marriage because, if divorced, Amy would take everything he owned. Following an examination of Brian's computer by the cybercrimes unit, it was revealed that Brian had searched for common and dangerous poisons. Which drug causes the most deaths each year? 16 household items that can kill you. 11 days before Amy's death, Brian also searched on his police office computer and viewed a YouTube report titled, "What Gunshot Residue Tells Us." Subsequently, investigator John Shreen, a ballistics expert and the prosecution's crucial witness, testified that Amy's wound was not self-inflicted and that she had been shot from a distance, not at close range as Brian claimed. The defense team attempted to discredit the evidence. However, the court's final verdict was delivered. Brian Fanion was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of his wife, Amy Fanion, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. If you liked the episode, don't forget to like, Share it with your friends who love mysteries, and subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any new episodes. See you in a new mystery and a new episode. Goodbye.